All right, here we are. Hello, everyone. Welcome to a very special episode of Ether Flows podcast. I have with me Debra Jordan-Kauble, and I am so excited to do this interview. I'm a little nervous, but I'm
Don't be
working through
nervous for me.
it. Well, this woman is brilliant. She's written 3 books, one of them with her sister, and she's written Extraordinary Contact, Life Beyond Intruders. She's written Abducted, the story of the intruders continues. That was written with your sister, right?
Right.
And then, shoot, I don't think I have the
I
Extraordinary
didn't write.
Contact.
Yeah, Extraordinary Contact. I didn't write Intruders. Bud Hopkins did, but I was the central figure in that book. So I've written 2 on my
Oh,
own.
okay. Yeah, my handwriting is not very readable right now. But yeah, she worked with Bud Hopkins extensively, and it's just an incredible story. You should check out any of her books that she's written. They're so helpful, and they are very gripping. They're very good stories. She's a member of Mensa. She is a MUFON investigator, and she has her own paranormal investigation group called Paranormal Underground. And she does like EVPs and investigations, and she's just an all-around amazing person, and I'm so grateful to have her as a guest. So with that,
thank you.
Yeah. Hi, Debra Jordan-Kauble.
Hi, Gina.
I love saying all 3 names.
That's most people call me Deb, and whatever you're happy with.
Yeah.
Thank you for inviting me.
I'm just happy to have you here.
I'm glad to be here.
I was telling you earlier, I found you on Whitley Strieber's podcast, and you were talking about your life, your story, and it's incredible. And I felt like, was it a 2-parter? I think maybe it was. I can't remember, but there's so much to your story that you could talk for days. You literally could.
I could, for sure. That's why it's difficult sometimes when I do a podcast that's an hour long, or even an hour and a half. I have to do the abridged version or the condensed version, and it's hard for me because when I tell my stories, I don't know why my brain feels like it must tell every little detail. I don't know why, and a lot of the stuff that I talk about have no impact on the actual story. It's just my brain wants to be so orderly and just specific. So
yeah. Well, I mean, you make for an amazing storyteller. Like I said, I could have listened to that podcast for hours if it was hours long. I can't remember how long it was, but like the story was so gripping and so extraordinary, but it was also really like grounded because you were going through a lot. I mean, you were going through all this incredible ET stuff and spiritual awakening and all of this incredible stuff, but you were also going through a lot of like 3D human life stuff as well. And just like the story of you in your 20s going through all of this kind of like working through PTSD and working through hypnosis with Bud Hopkins and just discovering all this stuff is just, it was incredible to me. I loved it.
Yeah. So back then on, the event that the Intruders book Bud wrote centered around was in June 30 of 83. Also at that time in my life, I was a single mom. I had just recently been divorced, which is rough. I had like a 3-year-old and a 4-year-old, and we had moved back on with my parents, which is also rough, and was trying to figure my way through life and figure out, okay, how am I going to raise these 2 kids? And I don't, this was the 80s, different whole time and different mindset of women. And I'm like, I don't want to be that woman who marries a guy just because I need him to help me raise my kids. I need a job. I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to do this on my own and trying to navigate, how I'm going to do it. I got into beauty school. I thought, okay, I can be a hairdresser. I love that kind of thing.
Mhm.
And I can make good money, raise my kids with it, stuff like that. So I'm struggling with all that stuff that's already stressful in life when all this the I'd had other paranormal experiences and other non-human intelligence contact previously in my life on a few occasions that I really didn't even know what to do with at that point, and kind of
Mhm.
assumed other people all had that as well, and was really trying to focus. My main priority at that point in my life was my two kids, trying
Mhm.
to raise them and be able to support them as a single mom. So, there was a lot going on. And I had already been diagnosed with anxiety, generalized anxiety, as a teenager that I struggled
Mm.
with anyway. And this
Jeez.
didn't help. That June 30 83 incident certainly didn't help because it was scary and
Oh, yeah.
traumatic. So,
Terrifying, right.
but I got through it.
Do you feel like getting into it at all?
Well, I don't mind at all. This probably, I mean, it happened 42 years ago. I'm quite sure there's a lot of people that have no idea what I'm talking about. They might not even know who Bud Hopkins is unless they're really deeply in the ufology, because Bud Hopkins was
For sure.
actually, in my opinion, he was like a pioneer in
Mhm.
this kind of research and the abduction research. But anyway, well, like I said, I was living with my parents at the time, just had moved back. And I was about to leave the house that evening to go sew. I actually wasn't going to sew. I was going to cut patterns. I wasn't talented enough to sew, but my friend made costumes, and she used to pay me a little money extra to cut her patterns out for her. So I was going to go do that. She just lived one street behind us, so it was
Mhm.
very close.
Mhm.
Uh, so after supper, I was getting ready to leave, and I looked out the back window, and I noticed that the light in my mom's pump house that was next to the swimming pool was on, and the door was open, which it shouldn't have been. And I made a note of it. I told my mom, and she said, "Don't worry about it. Your dad can close it when he gets home," because he was working second shift at one of the local automotive factories.
Mm.
So a few minutes later, I got in the car and I went to my friend's house. But before I left, I decided to go along the side drive and go look around, go to the turnaround that was behind Dad's workshop, which was behind the swimming pool on the lot, and just to make sure there weren't any prowlers. UFOs and aliens, that was like the last thing in my mind at that point. I was thinking burglars
Right.
and a little concerned with leaving my two kids and my mom home alone,
Mm.
because I felt like something was off. But I
Right.
didn't see anything other than I did notice that the pedestrian door to the garage that was attached to the house was open. And so I got to my friend's house a couple minutes later, and I called mom and I told her what I seen. And again, she says, "Don't worry about it. Your dad can close it when he gets home." And I'm like, "Okay." So I hung up the phone, and as soon as I hung up, she called right back. And she says to me, "I need you to come home right now." And I'm like, "Wow, this is not like my mom." And I was a little,
Mm.
disturbed by it. I'm like, "Why? What's wrong?" And my girlfriend's husband was in the room with us, and I think he could hear that I was uh, upset, and he says, "Tell her to call the police. That's what we pay him for." Over my shoulder into the phone, and my mom heard him, and she was like, "No, I don't want anybody here but you." I'm like, "Okay, fine." So I told my friend, "I'll be back. I'm going to run home, just take a look, make sure everything's okay, and then I'll be back." So I left, went home, met my mom in the Florida room. I had grabbed a shotgun that my dad had behind the trash compactor. It was not loaded, because when I moved in there, I'm like, "Please don't leave that loaded gun back there with my two kids." And they did.
Right.
They unloaded it. But mom's like, "That's not loaded, right?" And I said, "Yeah, I know, but whoever's out there won't." And
Yeah.
I'm thinking in my head, I can get close enough to them to swat them with it before they realize they're not going to get shot. You know what I mean? So,
Mhm.
and always say the fact that I actually even went out there and did that was way out of my wheelhouse at that point in my life. I would do that in a heartbeat now, because there's very little that scares me at
Right.
66 years old. There's not a whole lot that scares me.
Yeah.
And most of it's related to humans. But uh, but back then I was very timid, and I don't know what possessed me to go back there, but I did. I went looking around, didn't see anything. Found my dog under Dad's ladder truck back by the workshop, but she wouldn't come out. Uh, Went into the garage, and while I'm in there looking around, I suddenly started feeling like I was on fire. I felt so hot,
Mm.
and everything on me was tingly, like a crazy hot flash burning sensation. And I remember thinking, oh my God, I got to get out of here. And so I turned to run through the open door. And as soon as I hit the open doorway, something hit me in the chest, or a chest, like I don't know what they call it, solar plexus, like right
Oh,
here.
yeah, yeah. Mhm.
It was like a punch of light.
Oh,
And it was so intense and so white and bright. And I know my eyes were shut. They had to be shut,
mm,
but I could still see it. And I couldn't move, but I started to shake. And then the
mm.
shaking turned into vibrating, and it felt like I was shaking apart molecule by molecule. And I had no idea how long I was in this light or what was happening. I had no idea how long this
Wow.
whole thing. In my mind, I think to myself, I couldn't have tolerated that for very long. Couldn't Surely it couldn't have been that long.
Mhm.
But when the shaking stopped and the intensity of the light finally waned, uh, and stopped hurting, I I also realized, and I could open my eyes. I realized I was now outside the door frame on the patio, maybe 10 feet. And I don't
Hmm.
know how I got there. I don't remember walking out there or anything. And I still couldn't move, but I could see movement out in front of me. And I was watching with my eyes, but my vision was horrible. It was now darker outside. And also my vision was real splotchy. Like when you get I don't know if y'all remember flash cubes, but when you get a picture taken and the flash hit you right,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
it would
Mhm.
like, you'd have
Polaroids.
big white splotches in your vision for like 10 minutes because you couldn't see. You were blinded by it. Well, I was blinded by that light, but I could see movement in front of me. And I was trying to look and see for details. And I remember telling Bud, they look like little kids. And I remember thinking, why are these little kids in my mom's backyard? And they were
Mm,
kind of moving around they came from all different directions, and they lined up out by the garage, out by the driveway, off to my right, up near the end where the pool gate is. And they just all kind of lined up, and they just started sliding real evenly, like gliding down across the yard toward me. And I said, they
mm.
looked like they were bullet shaped. And I thought they were little
Oh, okay.
kids, but it's like their heads were big and then their little bodies were real tiny and skinny.
Mm,
But I couldn't see a lot of detail because I had so much white splotchiness in my vision. And as I was following them down, they were coming toward me, but not at me. And that was when I realized that to my left, there was something. We call it a craft because I don't know what else. We didn't know. I don't know what else to call it at the time, but it was very small. If you think about what typically what people think a UFO should be, it was shaped like an egg, but it was like on its bottom, like the big part of the egg was like near the ground, and then the pointy top was up straight up.
mm,
When I saw that thing, I completely lost sight of the little kids. I don't remember seeing them go in it or
mm.
where they went. But I saw that thing, and it wasn't much bigger than the pump house of the swimming pool. It was very small. And in retrospect, there's no way that 6 kids-sized people or anybody could get in that thing and go anywhere. So I really don't know what its real purpose was. But
Mm.
there it was. And there was a ball of light next to it, about the size of a basketball. It was softer white light, and it moved down very slowly, and then it moved up, back to where it was. And at one point, when I was looking at this thing, I almost felt like it wasn't totally on the ground because it seemed like it bobbled a little bit. But then I wasn't sure whether that was that thing or was my eyes. And I noticed some long, skinny things coming out the side of it that were touched the ground, but they weren't, in my opinion, like strong enough to be weight support. I don't know what they were.
Mm.
Uh, but it was around that time I felt someone pull down behind my shoulder, pull me from behind on my shoulder and say to me, it was unfortunate that I had felt pain, but I couldn't see anybody. And then after I started thinking about my kids, when I saw those kids in the yard and it reminded me that my kids were here in the house, I thought, oh my God, my kids. Again, I heard that voice, didn't see anybody, that said my children were fine.
Mm.
And the feeling that I don't need to worry about them. Um, the next thing I remember, and I don't remember seeing this thing go away. I don't remember anything except I heard my name, but this time his voice was different. And later on, I discovered that it was actually my mother calling my name out the
Mm.
back kitchen window. And when I heard her, it was like someone snapped their fingers and everything disappeared. And I was able to move. I turned towards the voice. I walked back up the steps, the back patio, and up the little steps to the upper porch where the kitchen door was, where mom was kind of hollering out the door. And she says, is everything okay? And I said, yeah, everything's cool. But I'm thinking to myself, and I'm thinking and Bud laughed when I told him that, yeah, everything's cool. But I was thinking to myself, man, I feel weird. I don't feel right. I feel gross. I want to get
Right.
wet. I don't want to cut patterns. I contacted my friend and I'm like, hey, you know what? I'm not feeling it. I'm not feeling like cutting
Mm-hmm.
patterns out. Let's go swimming. And she was like, okay. So her daughter and her came over. We walked back across the yard to the pool. At one point, her daughter stepped on something in the yard, and we thought she'd stepped on a bee or something. So we got to the pool and we're looking at it, see if there's a stinger in her foot or something, and we don't see anything. Now she's complaining that her foot is going numb, and it's kind of going numb up her leg and kind of weird stuff like that. And her mom's like, well, get in the pool. If it's a bee sting, the cold chlorinated water will feel good on it. And so we got in the pool. We messed around for 10 minutes maybe or so. And then all of us started feeling gross, like nauseated.
Mm.
And my eyes started burning. And I started seeing white halos around the lights outside, at the pool, because it was dark now. And we decided to call it a night. I think at one point my friend made comment about going to White Castle. Maybe we get something to eat, we'll feel better. I don't know if you know
Mm.
what White Castle is, but that probably
Oh,
wouldn't have
yeah.
been a good idea. Not if your stomach hurts, trust me. But
Yeah.
we ended up they went home and I went home. I went to bed. And then next morning when I got up, my eyes were swollen shut and I was in excruciating pain. I could not open
Mm.
my eyes. I felt like I had glass in my eyes and they were blood red. So my mom took me to the emergency room. And I don't know why, and people goes, there's no ophthalmologist in emergency rooms. Well, there was that day, and I don't know why. I have no idea why. This doctor was in there. When I came in with my eyes all wrecked up, somebody in the ER sent him into my little cubby. And he took a quick look at me and he asked my mom if I could take him to his office across the street. He'd have his people work me in because he felt like he could give me a better exam over there he had more equipment over there. And mom said yes, so she did. I don't even know who the guy was, couldn't tell you his name for all the tea in China, but I know where the office used to be in Indy. But anyway, he looks at me and one of the first things he says to me is, have you looked into the arc of a welder's torch? Have you looked in the sun? And I'm like, no. At this point, I didn't remember the bright light and all that with the kids in the yard and that egg thing.
Right.
And so I'm thinking, why are you asking me do I look stupid? No. And he was very surprised that I didn't have symptoms for days beforehand because they were so bad. But my eyes were fine before that night. So I was prescribed medication. It took weeks for my eyes to heal. And my vision from that point on went full on farsighted. At 23, I was wearing like a plus 2.5.
Wow.
I never wore glasses before. And let me just put this in here right now so I don't forget it. In my late 30s, they first saw cataracts in my eyes. And
Late
by the time
30s.
I, but they wouldn't operate on them because they didn't feel they were bad enough, and I was way young. I was too young. I made it to, I think, 49 or 50, and then finally had to replace both my lenses because the cataracts were so bad. Also, in my late 30s or early 40s, I was diagnosed with macular degeneration. I had druids and other things
Oh,
back there. And
jeez.
so for years now, I have to go to the eye doctor every 6 months and be dilated and they take pictures of my retina and all that jazz. And they
Mhm.
follow me. So far, my macular degeneration is dry. There's only one other person in my family that has ever had this, and it's my older sister, and she also had a UFO
Oh,
experience in
yes.
65. And then
Yeah.
the cataract things, nobody else in my family's had cataracts except for me and my younger son. My son was 38
Mm.
when he was diagnosed with cataracts, and they were so severe that he was legally blind. So he had to have his lenses replaced. And
Wow.
he also was exposed to some weird stuff when he was a kid there at the house. But anyway,
Yeah.
so I just wanted to throw that in there. Go back to the story now. Um, I had read a book called Missing Time by Bud Hopkins months before this happened. I never was able to finish it. I kept having panic attacks every time I tried
Was
to read
that
it.
was
That
that
was
the book that you found at the library and
Yes.
you were just terrified of it?
Yep, that's right.
Okay.
I mean, I think I went to the emergency room twice in 1 week thinking I was having a heart attack after trying to read this
Ah,
book.
jeez.
I remember
Yeah.
at one point my mom says, you need to take that book back to the library. We can't afford this. Because I was on mom and dad's insurance at the time. I wasn't 26 yet, so they were able to put us
Yeah.
on their. So my mom's like, we can't keep doing this.
Wow.
So I took the book back, never finished it. And I actually have a copy of it still here now that's signed by Bud, and I've still never finished it. But I think I could now if I wanted to. But in the back of that book, there was an address where you could write to the guy who wrote this book if you thought you had these kind of experiences. Well, a couple of days after the June 30 '83 incident, all the family had come over for 4th of July, and all the kids were running back to go swimming. And my oldest nephew come back in the kitchen and he said, "Grandma, what's wrong with your yard?" And she's like, "I don't know what you're talking about." So all of us adults went out there, and there was this huge mark in the yard, and it was huge. It was like an 8-foot circle diameter, and it had a streak going off of it that went all the way across the yard, all the way up to the driveway, up to where the gate to the pool is. It was exactly 2 feet wide and ended in a perfect arc. And all the grass in it was just like kind of a grayish brown, and it just fell over,
Mm.
like laid down. And the dirt was rock hard, and it smelled kind of weird. Um, And my mom giggles and she goes, "Oh, that's where our UFO landed the other night." And she's giggling, the kids are giggling, and I'm not giggling. I look at her and I remember thinking to myself, "Why did you say that? What is wrong with you? That's
Mhm.
not funny." And then it was like, bam, somebody just slapped me in the face. I started to remember that night immediately. And I remember the light, the kids, the egg thing. It all started coming back to me. All that day for a couple weeks after that, all kinds of stuff started coming back to me. Things that happened to me when I was a newly young married woman, things that happened to me when I was a teenager, things that happened to me when I was a little kid. All of it
Mhm.
started flooding back. And I also remembered that book, Missing Time. So I went back to the library and got the address out of the back of the book. I came home. I took a bunch of Polaroid pictures of that mark that was still in the yard, and I wrote like a 14-page letter to him. And I'm like, I don't know why I'm doing this. I've never written a book author before in my life. And, I feel like a crazy person, but I feel desperate
Yeah.
because at that point, once I saw the mark in the yard, it's like I came unglued. I feel like I had a nervous breakdown. I couldn't sleep at night. I could only sleep when the sun was up and people around me were awake. At night, I would sit in my kids' room between their beds, while they slept, like I was waiting for something to protect them from,
Mhm.
I could not go to the bathroom in the bathroom upstairs at night because the window opened up to right above the mark in the yard. And I kept feeling like somebody was going to see me or yank me out the window. I mean, I was just lost my mind basically.
Mhm.
Thank God for my parents. And they were sympathetic, and my mom was going through some things. She had remembered seeing, the light around a bird feeder and all kinds of stuff she couldn't understand either. And she knew how bad my eyes had been, you know, so suddenly. But uh I wrote that letter, and mom even told Bud. She said it was kind of strange because Debbie gave me the letter and I carried it around in my purse for like 2 weeks. And she kept thinking, I don't want to do this. Do I want to open this can of worms? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's what
Yeah.
she told
Definitely.
Bud. She kept thinking this to herself. And then she said one day she was at the mailbox with a handful of bills ready to drop them in. And she said something said to her, you mail Debbie's letter now. So she got it out of her purse and she dropped it in the mail. Well, eventually, shocking to me, Bud called, and I spoke to him. I was freaking out. I could feel my heart beating in my throat when I was talking to him. And I ended up I had a washer and dryer in storage, that I had a stackable washer and dryer I had at the apartment before I moved back home that I wanted to save. I sold them to make enough money to get a bus ticket to go to New York to see this guy. Right. So,
That's incredible.
well, the halfway to New York on the bus, I have this panic attack because I'm thinking to myself, what in the hell is wrong with you? You're a mother. You are on your way to New York, which I had this fear of being lost that I think stems from something when I was really little.
Mhm.
And, I carried a compass with me because I had trouble with north, south, east, and west, like dyslexic with that, and right, left.
Mhm.
And so I had this fear of being lost. I had this fear of being in big cities. I never went anywhere by myself in my life as a young adult. And here I am on a bus to New York City, of all places, like me, a little country bumpkin in Indiana. All I knew about New York was, what I saw in the movies and TV, and it was really
Right.
terrifying and overwhelming for someone like me. But here I am on a bus all the way to New York, 17-hour bus trip. About halfway through, I have this massive panic attack, and I'm like, "You are out of your mind. What is wrong with you?" And came this close to getting off the bus at the next stop and going home. But I didn't. I didn't. Got to New York. Bud was there. And I remember thinking to myself, this guy could be an axe murderer. He wrote a book about aliens, for God's sake. What is wrong with you? What is wrong with you? Right?
Yeah.
I'm thinking this
Mhm.
whole thing to myself. So, but I get there, and the first thing he does is take me to Dr. Clamar's office, the psychiatrist in New York. And later on, I thought, yeah, he was probably making sure I wasn't the axe murderer, taking me to a
Mm.
shrink to have me sized up before he took me
Goes
back
both
to his,
ways, I guess.
I know, and I didn't think about that at the time. I didn't dawn on me till later. I'm like, yeah, I
Right.
don't blame him. But and she was so nice. She was super nice lady, and she made me feel very comfortable. But that's when the investigation started. And again, this was 42 years ago, so people have to remember, we didn't have the internet, we didn't have Zoom, we didn't have cell phones. All we had were some very strategically placed after 6 p.m. long distance phone calls, because they were cheaper after 6 and you couldn't talk
Right.
very long, and a lot of letter writing, mostly on my part.
Mhm.
I mean, because I would write him with things that happened and things I remember. And then if they were big enough, he'd call me. And then he came to Indiana a few times, and he interviewed my family, my friends, my neighbors, our neighbors. My employer later, when he came, he later interviewed one of the ladies I worked for. So I mean, he was really thorough.
Mm.
And he also made arrangements for me when I came to New York again to go to a hospital. And I don't know, I'm pretty sure he didn't pay for it. He must have either gotten the services donated, or he got money to pay for it. I had an EEG where they put the wires on your head to see if I had
Mm,
epilepsy. I had a
right.
CAT scan of my brain. I had uh, psychological testing.
Mm.
It was 6 hours at the hospital this day, verbal and written psychological testing, and um, and then eventually, a few years later, I think he arranged for a person in Indiana to give me a voice stress test, which is like a lie detector test, sort of.
Oh, okay.
And I had one of those. And then several years after that, he arranged for my youngest son and I to go up to Notre Dame. There's a medical facility up there near the college that had this new technology called MRI at the
Hmm.
time. And we went up there, and Casey and I had MRIs done of our brains, which I never did hear what came of that. And there was some strangeness that happened around that as well. But anyway, so Bud invested a lot of time and a lot of his own money in this investigation. So he comes
Right.
to us after 2 or 3 years and he's like, I think this is a very important case because that mark in the yard, it lasted for 2 years and snow melted off of it the first year that it was there.
Oh,
You
that's so
know,
weird.
you could still see it after 3 years, although some of the grass had grown up into it, but that grass was a different color and texture. So but anyway, he came to our family and he said, I think this is a very important case because you have independent witnesses. He found two neighbors that witnessed things that night. We have the mark in the yard. My eye damage. My dog got very ill and had to be put down about 6 or 8 weeks
Yeah,
later.
that's very sad.
I know, and just all the other things that had come out because of his investigation. He wanted to write a book about it, and so our family at first we're like, oh, I don't think so. I mean, that wasn't the whole point of all this. I only contacted him because I was desperate. I wanted someone to help me rationalize this away or figure out that I'm mistaken, or help me
Hmm.
learn how to live with this, help, us learn how to live with it. Because it wasn't just my whole family had weird things happen to them. It wasn't just me. And finally, he convinced us that it would be helpful for millions of people, that millions of people out there just like us. And he just felt that it was really that important of a case. And so my family and I said, okay, you can write a book. So, and
That's
that's how he
amazing.
wrote Intruders. And, the rest is history.
Yeah.
See,
Yeah,
I told you it's
literally. I
bad,
mean,
it's long, and that's the condensed version. So,
it's such an incredible story. And the fact that your whole family was kind of in on it, like as far as the book writing goes, like Bud interviewed your whole family, didn't he?
absolutely. Yeah, it wasn't
Yeah.
just, that's another thing. It would have been like me and very easy for me to think, oh, you're just nuts, forget it. You know what I mean? But it was
Hmm.
not just me.
Yeah, it
My
was your
mom
sister
was there
too.
that night. My older sister, she's had weird things happen. My little brother and sister. My brother sweared up and down, he doesn't see anything. He didn't want to talk about it mainly. Mom told Bud that she thought he was kind of frightened by all of it. And then one time when Bud was here, she pulls out some school papers. Mom used to save some of our school papers when we were kids, in elementary
Hmm.
school. She pulls out school paper that belonged to my brother. And in the margins, he had doodled little alien heads with big black eyes. I mean, this was in the
Oh,
60s when we were in
yeah.
elementary school, so
Yeah.
even though my
Yeah.
brother always wants to say, no, I don't know, something in his subconscious was trying to tell us something. So,
Yeah.
yeah. It's
I remember when Whitley Strieber's book came out, Communion. I was 7 or 8, I want to say. And I remember being in the mall, in my hometown and going through the mall and walking past Barnes and Noble and seeing that book and having such a oh gosh, it was such a mix of emotions. It was so primal. It was like this attraction but repulsion at the same time, and it was terrifying. But I had to get the book. I actually stole the book. Sorry, Barnes and Noble. I stole the book from Barnes and Noble, and I like kept it under my bed, and I would look at it and just like freak myself out. Like it was so weird. I couldn't not read the book, but I also couldn't read the book or look at it. And it would scare me so bad that I would sit up at night, um, with the lights on, with like a little screwdriver in my hand because I was terrified to go to sleep. It was so like, I mean, I understand that little kids are scared of like weird looking stuff, but it was way more than that. And together with like a lot of other weird events that happened when I was a kid, it's clear that like, I was getting visitations and stuff too. And I have this memory, well, a lot of memories of when I was probably about 3 or 4, of a nighttime friend that would come and visit me, and like we would fly around the house together and like go look in on our parents and fly around in the backyard and stuff. And like, I don't know, I haven't really talked to my brothers about it, and I don't think my mom has ever seen anything like that, but yeah, there's a lot of parallels.
And you'd be
It's weird.
surprised what your mom might see, because I had no idea that my mom ever
Mm,
had any weird things happen to her in her
right.
whole my whole existence, until Bud came one night. We're all sitting around the kitchen table talking. He's asking all kinds of questions, and he asked my mom, "Have you ever had any strange things happen?" And my mom's like, "Well, there was
Mm.
this one time when I was a little girl, and I was out playing in the woods, and I started being chased by this little boy."
Oh,
And Bud's like,
yeah.
"Oh, really?" And I'm like, "Mom, we never knew." We didn't know a whole lot about my mom's history because my mom was adopted when she was 2. She was in
Okay.
an orphanage in Louisville, Kentucky, and she was
Mm,
adopted by a master sergeant. Grandpa ended up being a master sergeant when he retired in the Army, and they took her, and they moved to the Philippines. They lived in China for a little while. Then she came
wow.
back, was in Rhode Island, then ended up, after he retired, went back to Kentucky. And then she met my dad when she was 16, and they got married. So
Mm,
it worked. They were married like 56 years when she passed away. So, but
wow.
so we don't know a whole lot about her family. And I
Mm,
recently, I'd say in the last couple of years, I discovered that I have at least one cousin who has had strange things happen, because
mm,
uh, and my family's not real close. We don't really hang out or talk anymore like we did when we were kids, when
mm.
our parents were all still alive. But my oldest cousin reached out to me, and he said he had seen me on a television show. And then he said he was proud of me for speaking out and standing up, and that I wasn't the
Yeah.
only one in the family who had a story to tell. And
Oh,
I
wow.
was shocked, honestly. I mean, I was, it made me feel good, and I'm glad he was proud of me, but I was surprised to hear him, say that. So God only knows. I do believe that, I do believe they do keep, once they've contacted, messed with somebody in a family, I do believe they keep track of them. I don't know who they is. I used to assume they were
Mm,
aliens from another planet, you know what I mean? But
yeah.
now I'm not so sure. My thoughts and things
It
have
could be
changed.
ourselves. Who knows?
Yeah, I have a few different theories on that myself. You know what I mean? I feel like I've seen enough, and I've experienced enough, and I've come to the conclusion, this is my own opinions, right?
I love to hear
That
it.
at least some of what I've had contact with is uh, either extra dimensional,
Hmm. For sure.
or uh, somebody from my own future.
Hmm.
And
That makes sense.
and I think it's more than one thing. I think I've had contact with more than one different type of thing,
Mm,
because I uh, I think once you have contact like that, you attract attention from others.
yeah,
You know what I mean? Kind
definitely.
of, my friend Forrest one time made the analogy, kind of like a bug zap, like that blue bug zapper in the dark that attracts all the flies and gnats and mosquitoes,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Yeah,
exactly.
I feel like a bug zapper, and that I got involved in the paranormal stuff, which we talked about earlier. Probably about 2005, I started getting super fascinated with it and felt a connection between the two. Okay, and then I captured my first EVP 28 years ago, something like that, and it
Mhm.
was the very clear voice of an old man that said, "Are the spirits listening?" And then a little child's voice behind it said, "Can I listen too?" And I had an epiphany at that moment. I'm like, "Oh my God, we're the
Wow.
spirits somewhere else, and someone is looking for us or knows we're here." You know,
Mhm. Or they're just
and
right here in a slightly
mhm.
different vibration,
And I
you
think
know?
exactly, and I think that's why. And I think that's why I started getting fascinated with paranormal and started feeling a connection, because I feel that the alien, quote unquote, and I use that term as the basic generic term for unknown, uh,
Sure.
that I've had contact with, are possibly more likely that. And then some of the EVPs I captured when I began to do that, which incidentally, my little first groups that I used to work with called me the antenna, because it was like my recorder would pick the EVPs up when the other people's didn't. And we're all in the same room. Okay.
Oh, funny.
So, but not all the time, but
Mhm.
occasionally. And they teased me because every time we went on an investigation, we got like 20 EVPs, which is unheard of. But I felt like some of what I was recording was not ghosts or spirits, was never, it isn't dead and never lived here to begin with. You know,
Yeah.
I also started becoming fascinated with sound and vibration and energy. And I feel like I feel like this early contact that I had and these lucid dreams and these, like, they call them downloads now. Back then, I just called them me being crazy and
Right.
would write them
Right.
down.
Yeah.
These were all things that were trying to push me in this direction
Mhm.
to find this out on my own, to figure this out.
Yep.
That sound is so important, that it can heal, it can change everything, it can move mountains literally with
It
the
can
way it
shatter
vibrates.
steel, it can destroy, it can create, it
It's
can
important,
heal,
yeah,
like you said.
and
Yeah, it's amazing.
my body is just molecules vibrating. I learned that when I got hit with that light, because I feel like I was feeling my molecules vibrate individually. You know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
that shaking turned to a vibrating, and it became very intense. And it's like I went into
It's like you were breaking
myself.
apart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, and then when I saw, in the court, I had this insatiable desire for knowledge, and I started to, like, once I got into the internet, and I fully understand that not everything on the internet is real, but I try to stick with scientific sites and things that are documented and stuff like that. And I read about the study between sound and water, and I
Mhm.
realized that I'm 60% water. And
Mhm.
now I understand why when I listen to certain songs, I feel a certain way physically, because
Yeah.
the vibration of the choice of those notes is changing something in my water. You know what I mean? My
Right.
mouth.
And also
So,
it's a frequency which your chakras
mhm,
resonate with as well. So, sometimes you'll hear a certain song and your heart chakra will just start vibrating and just open up and you're like, "What was that about?" And
mhm.
it's the frequency. Yeah.
And the night that I got hit in the chest in 83, I was a certain 22, 23-year-old kid with this mindset, didn't know jack about life or even myself. And everything started changing at that point. That was like the the pivotal moment in my life where everything changed. I sometimes said in the past that I died that night and this new person was reborn.
Yeah.
Something changed. And I've been on this journey of discovery ever since. And it it's been physical, It's been psychological, it's been intellectual, and it's been spiritual. There is a spiritual element to
Absolutely.
this phenomenon that
Mm.
a lot of scientists and nuts and bolts guys don't want to address, but it is a part of it that they are going to have to address eventually,
Yeah.
because it is it's the it you it's a piece of the puzzle that you can't get the full picture of till you place it. So that there's connection, all of it.
Absolutely. I believe that too. I I've told the story a few times. I'll make it really quick. But I live in Michigan with my wife, and we were living in Detroit at the time, and we came to Traverse City, which is kind of like it's in the lower upper part of Michigan. It's very beautiful. It's right off of Lake Michigan. And we went on vacation there, and I was outside one night looking at the lake and looking at the stars, and um all of a sudden this giant orb shot out of a tree, and then I saw this giant sparkly light ship come over the roof over my head and go over the lake, and it took about 7 minutes to before it got out of sight. It was moving very slow, and like that changed my life. I had no idea what it was. I just knew something like super profound had just happened. I'd never seen anything like that before. And I came back into the Airbnb, and my wife was like, "How are the stars? How is it? How was it outside?" And I was like, "It was okay." Didn't say a word. Didn't say a word for probably at least a year. But I didn't know what to do with it. I had no idea. And then we came back to Detroit, and I started seeing them in my backyard. They like followed me, and I started seeing triangles in the middle of the day in my backyard. I was seeing like plasma looking kind of ships. I was seeing like you were talking about those big orange ones, the big orange lights that kind of look like lanterns almost. I started seeing those. All this stuff started happening in my house, and like my whole life kind of blew up, and I had to change everything. I quit my job. I had to like come out to my wife about seeing all this stuff and feeling energy and hearing voices, and it's intense, you know. It's like I don't know. Yeah, you wrestle with wondering if you're crazy or if like what's going on. So it's very life-changing, and I do feel like there's a spiritual component to it. Absolutely.
I've been fortunate in my life that I have had a lot of support from family and friends, mostly because they have had their own experiences and they've been with me when they've seen weird stuff, and had
Hmm,
weird things happen to them too.
right.
And I also have been fortunate enough to have found pretty couple of pretty good therapists over my lifetime, because I wrote in my book about when my husband committed suicide and when the tornado came and destroyed the house and dropped it on top of me, like Dorothy from the Wizard of Oz. Fortunately,
Yeah.
I wasn't hurt. I could I should have been killed. I had an F3 tornado drop a whole house on me, and they had to
Yeah,
take me out.
that's crazy.
I was fine. Mentally, I wasn't fine, but my body was. uh, so I mean, I've been through a lot of in the divorce, and lost both my parents, lost dear friends, been in actually with my mother-in-law and my mom when they passed, in the room holding their
Oh,
hand,
wow.
and just like all kinds of traumatic events that some people never have to experience in their life. And it seems like the universe decided to like throw the book at me. Somebody said one time, "Oh, you choose all this," and I said, "Well, I can't imagine I would have chosen all this unless I got some big promise of something at the end."
Yeah,
Or
right.
who did I piss off up there? I had that thought every now and then. But
Right.
but and this all happened as mostly in an adult, but also the weird stuff was happening to me before that. And like I said, I've been fortunate enough to have a couple of good therapists, because clearly I needed them, and I
Mm,
realized that. And one of the therapists I had years ago told me, he said, crazy people don't worry about whether or not they're crazy. They think they're fine, and they think everyone else is crazy. So I think you're okay.
True. Yeah.
And then, of course, then I was tested in that hospital in New York, and they said I was not prone to fantasy or delusions. I was not schizophrenic. The only two diagnoses that I came away from was that I had anxiety and that I had PTSD. And this was back in 1985, I think, or 86, in the 80s, long before PTSD was a household word. You know what I mean?
Right.
Or acronym. But Bud always made the point of, well, you know what? You have to have some really traumatic event to cause you to have PTSD. And at that point in my life, none of the other stuff had happened that happened later.
Mm-hmm.
And now the therapist that I have now, she's fantastic. We talk about all this life stuff, but we also talk about all this weird stuff as well. And she is like totally on board with helping navigate me through it. She's amazing. And she says, when you came to me and I've seen all of the things that happened to you in life, and then I got to know you and realized, man, this lady is okay. I mean, she's grounded. She's dealing with it well. I don't know how much more I can help with her. And I'm like, no, don't say that. I said, do you think maybe it's because I was forced to deal with these traumas that were unspeakable that, in life beforehand, before all the other stuff happened when I was younger, like the 83 incident and couple other traumatic incidences that are terrifying when I was younger, and I had to learn how to live with it. And I became a survivor, and developed survivor coping skills and stuff. I said, do you suppose that I learned from that and it helped me with the other stuff? And she says, it's possible. It makes sense. So one thing I learned from all of that, and from all the weird, the other like regular life stuff that rocked my world, is that I am stronger than I ever thought I could be, and there isn't anything that I can't accomplish if I put my mind to it. And as I told you before, I do not allow myself to be the victim, even though the early stuff was traumatic. And I don't begrudge anybody who is still in that, in that trauma, because I was there. I understand that. But once I realized that, I can't control what happens to me in life, whether it be with them or anything, but I can control how I'm going to choose to respond to it or react to it. That's my choice. Then that's my power. And once I took that back, I was good. And then I moved forward and I visualized this. This slingshot is life. And this little pouch with this little bean, I'm this little bean. And this little pouch, and this is the universe pulling it way down there, farther and farther. And I realized the farther down the universe pulls this little bean, when it lets go, the higher up I go.
Exactly.
So all of the trauma that I've experienced through this paranormal NHI stuff and life, I wouldn't change any of it, because it's the reason I've been able to attain what I've attained thus far. I have a long way to go. I'm a work in progress till the day I die, and then hopefully beyond. But I feel like I'm a whole different person, and my eyes have been opened. I'm aware of a lot of things that go on around me, and most people go through their whole lives with little blinders on and can't see, but I do. And I feel like my reason for being here, my reason for speaking out and making myself public at a time when it wasn't cool, and I was making myself a target, and I didn't want to, and was nervous and scared and timid about it, but yet felt almost pushed into the light to tell my story. The reason was because I can help somebody else become aware and realize what they're capable of and what they are, right? Because at the end of the day, now at 66 years old, I feel like human beings are incredibly powerful, energetic creatures who have no clue what they really are capable of. They don't remember, um, but it's there. And if once you see it, you can't unsee it. Once that toothpaste comes out of the tube, it's not going back. And
Right.
it's hard for some people. Even good things, good change is hard for people. But if they can see somebody else that's gone through it and is okay, maybe they'll feel more comfortable putting their toe in the water and trying out their new, paradigm. So
Exactly. Yeah, every time I've felt scared to tell a friend about what's been happening with me, or come out of the I don't know, spiritual closet to some people and talk about my experiences, I haven't had a bad reaction. I mean, with the channel, maybe I've had a couple of like negative comments or whatever, but personal friends, no one has ever said, "Oh, that's too weird. I can't be friends with you." I've never gotten that rejection that I was expecting. So
I
it's like
had
it's
that.
all coming from inside.
Right.
Yeah.
One time I had, when I worked somewhere, they didn't even know about this until after I already left. And then when they
Mm.
found out about, the book Intruders and that experience, one girl got mad at me and wouldn't speak to me anymore. Uh, but I later found out the reason was not because of what experience I had, was because I didn't tell her. That's what
Oh.
made her mad. She was mad
Mhm.
because I didn't feel comfortable enough sharing it with her.
Yeah.
So
That's the flip
there's
side of
that.
it, right?
There's that, yeah. But anyway, yeah. So I mean, I, I think people are going to realize at some point here, hopefully in the near future, just how powerful they are, how powerful their thoughts are.
Exactly.
Everything you see around you began with a thought.
Mhm.
So your thoughts are powerful and can create whatever reality you choose to think about. And you know what?
Exactly.
I think I was even aware of that before I was consciously aware of it, because when my kids were growing up, I never let them watch scary movies like, Freddy movies and crap like that. And I don't watch
Mhm.
them. And when somebody asked me about that one time, why don't you ever? Because I don't want that. I don't want those negative images and thoughts in my mind, because I feel like if they're in there, they're going to come back to haunt me. And they're going to be
Mm.
something that my subconscious can use to manifest somewhere else. When I see TV,
Absolutely. I
when I
agree.
watch this stuff on TV, like the apocalypse, 10 ways the world is going to end, I'm
Nope.
like,
Nope.
I'm like, what in the hell are you doing? Why are you doing that? Because people are powerful. They're going to see that, and that's going to churn, and they're going to create
Yep.
the you're going to create the energy that manifests in that shit. Stop it.
Mhm.
Don't make stuff.
Absolutely.
Why you make stuff like that? Why do that?
Yeah, I completely agree, and I kinda came to the conclusion with all that, actually, with when it comes to protests, like protesting and the kind of action that you can take when you see something in your external that you don't agree with. um for some reason, I was trying to think of some idea, because there were some companies that were doing some weird stuff to Lake Superior. I live right next to Lake Superior, and I was very upset about it, about the environmental damage that was being done. And I was like, what can I do? Can I gather a bunch of people and protest, or talk to my senators, or what can I do? And something in me told me that the most effective way to deal with this would be to pray for peace and unity. And instead of fighting fire with fire,
Mm-hmm.
to change the energy, change my energy about
You're.
it, and to
I think
focus
you're
more on
right.
peace.
Right,
Yeah.
and you're
And
correct, and I know that.
it seems counterintuitive, but I really feel like that's the best way for me anyway.
It is, and you're correct, and it's correct. But and there's a lot of things going on in the world right now that I'm not happy with, and I am human. I'm a human being, and
Mm,
I have anger, I have feelings of anger, but I also understand that anger is not always negative. Anger doesn't have to be a bad thing. Anger can be a
right.
motivator, okay?
Exactly.
And it's a fine line between protecting yourself spiritually and emotionally and staying informed and understanding what it is that you're facing so that you can formulate the correct course of action. And it's easy to get swept into everything, and I get criticized sometimes by friends because I'm vocal about things that I don't
Hmm.
like. Part of me is because I'm a survivor, and one of the aspects of being a survivor is being aware of your surroundings and knowing what you face. And my inclination is to want to share that with everyone I love so that we all know what's coming, you know what I mean? And we can all
Hmm.
face it together. And I do the positive things alone in my space when I'm, calmed down and tuned in. But I'm human, so
Yeah.
I get pissed.
Yeah.
Excuse my French.
I mean,
I get
it's
mad.
yeah, and
So,
I feel like that's part of the whole that's part of the name of the game is mastering your emotions
mhm,
and realizing what you can control, which is,
yeah,
yourself, and
right.
things that are it's kind of like that. What is that? The AA prayer, the wisdom,
Yeah.
what is it? The courage to change the things I can. Something about, well, I can't remember. Anyway,
And the
it's a
wisdom
cool
to know the
prayer.
difference. Yeah, yeah, I mean,
Right.
it's good for everyone, not just AA or
Yeah,
any other, but,
exactly.
it is. It's good for everyone. And at the end of the day, I think too, when I whatever this contact I've had has made me realize that, our time is an illusion, and our
Yes,
individuality is we are all connected. The
exactly.
illusion of being alone and an individual is there for a reason,
Mhm.
so that we can have the experiences that we have that help to, you know propel you give us the fuel to propel us along our path. We have to have these experiences, and in order to do that we have to do it alone. I mean, I could I always said, oh, I wish I could go inside somebody's head and make them see and know everything I feel and know and see, and it would be so much easier, and it's so much more effective and so much more efficient. But then it's like, but then if they didn't come along it on their own volition, it doesn't have the same meaning or the same
Yeah.
impact.
It's like you
So
would be controlling their experience.
right. So even though we are all one, in my opinion, we're all connected to the same life, and as well as the other life forms, the non-human life, and the other dimensionals, uh, we function as an individual in order to to grow.
Mhm.
So, I mean, there now I'm going out there, my brain is going poof, but you see the path that I've been propelled in. I've been shoved into this
Love it.
path, not particularly because I wanted to, but that's what I'm supposed to do. So I'm just
Yeah,
going to go with it.
I love it. I think it's amazing. Do you still have experiences with these visitors?
I have um, something comes around. It's not quite the same. It's certainly not traumatic. I'm
Mm,
not scared. I get annoyed or a little startled if I'm not expecting anything. But
right.
things happen, and mostly it's lucid dreams in the evening. Like within
Mm,
my last 15 minutes of my sleep cycle, I'll have a lucid dream, and
mhm.
it's usually some kind of a message or something. And then one time, very interesting. I won't keep long, but I went for a walk out in the fall. I was trying to ground myself and relax. It was nice weather. Had my headphones on, listening to some of my favorite music, and this wasn't a dream. Don't, I mean, don't. This actually happened. Um,
Mhm.
I was walking around and I heard, "Hey, Deb," a man come up behind me and say, "Hey, Deb." And I thought maybe it was one of my neighbors. I didn't recognize the voice. I pulled my headphones off and turned around and no one was there. And at first it startled me and I'm like, okay, what's happening here? And then once I got over that initial startle, I'm like, "Hey, what?" And he said something to along the effects of, I wrote it down. "Did you know that where you are, I look like a little white ball of light just floating around in the world, and that's all you can see. But actually, where I am, I look just like you." And he
Oh,
says, and
I
you
love that.
look like a little white ball of light whizzing around in my darkness. But
Mm,
you look just like me where you are. And I
yeah.
said, and I'm standing in the road now talking to myself. And later I thought, oh, I hope people, I hope people that saw me thought I was talking on my phone. I said, "Well, are you dead?" And he laughed and he said, "No, I'm as
Yeah.
alive as you are." And I said, "Well, are you an alien?" And he kind of chuckled and he said, "No, they're your future." And then I said, "Well, then who are
Oh,
you?" And that was it. That was the end of the conversation. He didn't answer me
I
back,
love that.
and I stood
Yeah.
there for a minute, and then I could. So that's the kind of stuff that I have happened to me now,
Oh,
which you could
that's
argue sounds
wonderful.
absolutely insane. And
No, I don't think so at all.
but yet,
I love it.
it is what it is.
Yeah.
That it is
It's
what it is.
profound is what it is. I mean, that's amazing. I get this image when you were talking about that of like just being between a piece of glass or just like a one-way mirror or something and just touching hands. Just like we're so close.
Whoever
So
it
close.
is knows who I am
Yeah.
and has probably spoken to me before. So,
Probably.
and I
Yeah.
don't know why,
That's
but
oh, that's beautiful.
it's weird.
Yeah.
That's just me.
Is yeah. Is that why you do so much research like with the paranormal stuff, with the EVPs? You're just fascinated with that
I'm really drawn
idea?
to it because I feel like the UFO phenomenon is
Mhm.
more closely related to the paranormal than most people realize. That
I
they are,
totally
in
agree.
fact, of the same thing, created by some of the same things. I believe there's multiple different non-human intelligences involved in the human ET experience. Okay. There's more than
Mhm.
one human, there's more than one non-human intelligence, and there's more than one agenda. There's lots of different things going on. I personally feel like somewhere out there's a argument between a couple of others over us and what should
Mm,
be done with us. You know what I mean?
I can
Um,
see that.
but and then I believe there's this multi-layered existence that surrounds us that we are unable to perceive because we aren't built to receive it. In other words,
Mm,
like I'm sitting here in my office and I've got 4 Wi-Fi signals from our routers going through me, right? And there's
mhm.
a television signal going to the antenna on my TV. There's Wi-Fi signals going to my computer. There's cellular signals going to my phone. I don't realize any of them are there. I don't see them. I don't know they're there. I don't feel them because I'm
Mhm.
not made to receive anything like that. But that doesn't mean they're
Right.
not real. And that doesn't mean they're
Mhm.
not there. And the same thing goes for all of the life around me. I feel like a little tube type radio in a Dolby digital surround sound world, right? I can get a little sliver of something, but, you know, there's so much more that I can't perceive. Now,
Yeah.
I feel like my early contacts when I was a child, when I was a young teenager, when I was a young mother, possibly did something to me physically. I laughed one time. I used to work at building circuit boards, repairing circuit boards, and installing wire harnesses and things. And I said somebody installed an extra wire harness in me somewhere because I've got connections that everyone has in them, but they just haven't been plugged in yet. And somebody went in and
Mhm.
plugged in my wire harness, because now I'm sensing and feeling things that other people don't. They're not, and it's not that they're not capable of, everyone is, but somehow I got plugged in. And everybody can get plugged in. It's I don't think it's any one particular way to do it. I think it's different for every person. And that's part of what I feel like. Maybe if I said one word or phrase, or I put one idea in somebody's head, I helped plug them in some way or another. And that's what I am here for. So I have fulfilled my destiny in that way. You know what I'm saying?
Well, you helped plug me in by writing that book. It really helped. It was
Good.
an amazing read, and it was like, also it was at a time where I really had I had no one to talk to about it. I didn't have a community of people who have experienced the same thing. So I felt very isolated and very kind of siloed off. And so finding that book it really helped. It really changed my
Well, I
perception
appreciate
on
that.
a lot of,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's part of the reason. And, back 40 some years ago, I said I felt very isolated here in Indiana, even though I was fortunate to have more family and friends around me. Still,
Mm,
I mean, we didn't sit around and talk about this all day, every day. I mean, I could literally go years without talking about anything weird, but it was always there.
yeah.
So I understand that feeling of feeling alone. And I'm so thankful that I have the opportunity to help make that better.
Yeah. Well, and that's what this podcast is about. It's about helping people to not feel isolated with what they're experiencing. And yeah, I'm so thank you so much for being here and being on the show with me and having this really great conversation. I felt like I feel like it was 5-star conversation.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, I appreciate the invitation. Um, I really do. I
Yeah.
appreciate your patience as I ramble through all of the massive stuff I have.
No
I'm a
way.
yacker, and like I
It's
said, I
so
could talk for days.
fascinating. Yeah, absolutely. Well, here, I'm going to end the recording, and to anyone who's enjoyed this video, check out Debra's books. If you haven't subscribed, if you'd like to do that, that would be great. And that's it. Have a great day, guys. Bye.
Bye.
All right, let's do this.